We're going to start our grammar class today. We're going to continue our class on the third grammatical case. And last time we talked about the uh, particles of the third grammatical case. Then we talked about the association of third grammatical case on the basis of suffix letters. Today we're going to discuss the most, out of the three. So whenever we discuss a particular grammatical case with the particle, there are three things which are most important. Uh, the first one is the particles, introduction of the particle, the definition or characteristic of the particular grammatical case. Then, if it is a dependent particle, then we introduce the association of the particles based on the suffix letter. If it is an independent particle, then we don't have to introduce the association because it does not associate based on the suffix letter. The word dependent here, when we talk about dependent, what is it dependent on? It is dependent on the suffix letters. So therefore, dependent particles. It depends on the suffix letter in order to establish the association of the particular particle with any sort of name. So now when I'm saying name, I'm referring to term. So any term. So if you want to associate that particular particle to any term, it will depend on the suffix letter of the term, which we discussed already, and which is different for different particles. And then finally, the usage case. So the most important out of the three is the usage case, because the usage case teaches us in what type of uh, in what type of uh, in what type of usage do we use these particles, and what type of usage in day-to-day, it may be speaking, it may be writing, is these particular particle used in, and how one should interpret the usage of such particle. So definitely the usage uh, also tells us that the particular uh, particle has a meaning dependent on the structure or the context of the entire statement rather than the particle itself. So therefore, usage case becomes very, very important. And so today, from today to few classes, we will discuss the different usage cases of the third grammatical case. And let me share the screen. Okay, so I hope everyone is able to see this. Namya Sumbachera, third grammatical case, the subject case, and today we're going to discuss the usage case. So we're going to discuss three usage cases, or three different. So it's one usage case with three variations. So one usage case with three variations. And the main difference between the usage cases are on the uh, main. So each statement conveys a particular meaning. So the very usage of the particle, if it's done for a particular meaning, then we consider it to be a usage case. So each usage case will utilize or will use the particle to show different meaning of the statement, or to depict a different meaning of the statement. So different statements require the same particle to function differently, so that the entire context becomes different. But this doesn't mean that the particle itself is capable of doing it. It is because of the context that the very function the particle performs changes. So once again, reminding that we are focused more in the context being influential towards the particle rather than the particle being the overall authority of a statement. So we don't discuss the statements and the grammatical case on the basis of understanding a particular particle having the authority to change the context of a statement. But the context of the statement having the influence over the particle so that the particle can perform different function in regards to the different grammatical case or usage cases. Okay, so before I begin, I will recite this. So today we have a so this is a verse which is taking refuge, or it is also taking inspiration from Goddess Saraswati. So I will recite this, and I've written the English too. So Namo Guru Saraswati Tusum Kembe Hamo Yangchen Dawe Tangjin Peme Marchime Kusan Yangcho Gunden Ishema Yangchen Mai Gunden Guntosho. So this particular verse that we have, so the first line, which is Namo Guru Saraswati, which means I prostrate to you, O Goddess, O Guru Saraswati. So the first line, which is Tusum Kembe Hamo Yangjema, means Goddess Saraswati, who is the Goddess Saraswati, who is the Goddess Saraswati, who beholds the knowledge of the three times. So Goddess Saraswati, beholding the knowledge of three times. So Tusum Kembe Hamo Yangjema Dawe Tangjin Peme Marcheme, possessing the radiance of the moon with sprinkle of lotus red. So this describes the features of the Goddess Saraswati with the radiance of the moon and a little bit of red of the lotus. So with a little bit of shade of the a bit of shade of red of lotus. Kusan Yangcho Gunde Hishima. Kusan Yangcho Gunde Hishima. Wisdom incarnate with perfect form and all the perfect speech. So the wisdom incarnate, the female wisdom incarnate, one who possesses the perfect form and the perfect speech, all the perfect speech. Yangchen Mai Yuande Guntopsho. May I attain all the qualities of Saraswati, Mother Saraswati, oh Saraswati. Change this. So may I attain all the qualities of Saraswati. So this is taking inspiration from Mother Saraswati. Now with this verse, taking it as a symbol of auspiciousness, let us begin today's lesson on the usage case of the particles of third grammatical case. So the usage cases shown with the same verse that we used for the first lesson. So that it's the same verse from the text, which shows the 5 particles of third grammatical case. Similarly, that verse also tells us that there is also tells us about the usage case of the third grammatical case. So, tenam sata chengani, which talks about the 5 particles of the third grammatical case possessing the suffix sa. Nami sumba chera te. Nami sumba chera te, which means the third grammatical case that is of the subject case. So here we see that these 5 particles are used in a particular usage case that is of the subject case. So 5 particles, those with sa at the end, are of the third grammatical case. So we're using it for the third grammatical case, the third grammatical case being the case of the subject case. So here we understand that the usage is of the subject case. So we elaborate more on this. So ide cherai tunjor. Tunjor means usage case. Tunjor means usage case. Chede teki tunjor lani. So there are 2 types. There are 2 usage case for the third grammatical case. Tangbo shungla ngoden teki tunjor. Shungla ngoden mayimbe teki tunjor. So there are 2 types of usage cases of particles of third grammatical case. First, the usage case that is directly stated in the text of 30, which we read right now, is of the subject case. So the subject case is stated directly in the text. So both in the commentary that we're reading, as well as the source text that is of the 30, the usage of these particles as the subject case is stated directly in the text. Second, the usage case that is not directly stated in the text of 30. So these are the usage case that are used in Tibetan language, but it is not directly stated in 30. These are more inferential. So one may ask, if these are inferential, then how do we know that these are the usage case? It is very clearly stated in the text of Smriti Gyana, the armor of speech, the armor of speech, in which Smriti Gyana, Pandit Smriti Gyana states the usage of third grammatical case for cases other than the subject case. That is, the cases which are depicted or which are understood from the text, but not directly stated there. It's more inferentially and are mostly shown in the commentaries of the original text. So after many years of studying Tibetan and being a master in Tibetan language, Pandit Smriti Gyana wrote the text, which is a commentary on the 30, that is of the speech of armor of speech, armor of speech. So therefore, in that particular text, Smriti Gyana talks about those other usage cases which are not directly stated in the text, but are more inferential and also understood by the usage of the Tibetan language. So through his observation and different commentaries, he stated all the other or inferential usage case of the particle of a third grammatical case. Now, so there are 2 types of usage case. Usage case which are directly stated in the text of 30 and usage case which are not directly stated in the text of 30. So we're going to discuss both. So now, first, the more common usage case, which is known by most, is the usage case which is stated directly in the text. of 30. That is the subject case. Chede take it to enjoy shongla ngode take it chede take it to enjoy shongla ngode take it to enjoy nis. So the usage case of the third particles of third grammatical case, which are directly stated and directly stated and apparent in the text. So the usage case that the text includes as a writing, which is directly stated, directly understood, not inferentially. So that particular usage case, so this is take. Just correct this. Take it to So the usage case of particles of third grammatical case that is directly stated in the text is the usage case in which the particles of the third grammatical case is used in order to show an action is done by a subject. So the usage case that is more popular, usage case that is known commonly by most of the native speaker and those who are learning Tibetan grammar is the usage case that is directly stated in the text of 30 as well as the commentary of 30, which talks about the usage case of particle of third grammatical case in which it shows or depicts an action is done by a subject. So it shows that a particular action is done by a subject. So in those kind of statement in which we see the usage of the particle of third grammatical case, in which these particles function to show an action done by a subject, these type of usage are known as the subject case. And therefore, these are the usage case that is directly stated in the text. Okay, so so the statement depicting action by the subject are also classified in three. So even the usage case, which is directly stated in the text, has three variations. So the statement has three variations. It has three variations because these three statements have different narration and functions to show different meaning. Different meaning as in the context, but ultimately all of them are showing an action done by a subject. But the classification or the factor of distinction is based on the subject. So there are three classifications of the subject case. The subject case, the first usage case, 당보 제법보 쪼 저와 제법 뜸바 니바 제법보 쪼당 펠베 저와 제법 뜸바 숨바 제법보 펠베 저와 제법 뜸바. So the statement depicting action by the subject are classified in three. First, the statement depicting the action by primary subject. So we already discussed this in previous classes. We discussed that the subject are classified in two: the primary subject, the secondary subject. The primary subject can be classified. One of the factors that distinguishes a primary and the secondary subject is based on the intention of action, but this is only valid if the primary subject is animate or living. Otherwise, when it comes to inanimate subject, we cannot talk about the intention. So therefore, the classification due to intention is only valid if the subject is living or animate. But that is one factor of classification as the primary and secondary subject. The other factor, which is the more important factor, is that the primary subject are the ones which are the main and the direct subject, meaning that these are the individual or unit as a whole, whereas the secondary subject are the tools, or the components of the main primary subject. For example, if the primary subject is a carpenter, then the ruler will be the secondary subject that is used by the carpenter. If a person is the primary subject, then the body parts like the hands, the feet, or something that's intangible such as the mind could be the secondary subject. And we also understand that if it is something like something that cannot have any it does not utilize any tool or does not have any component, then it is only a primary subject, such as the wind. So therefore, the secondary subject are the subject which are either the tool that is utilized by the primary subject or part of the primary subject, a particular part, component of a primary subject. And therefore, since we are classifying and distinguishing on the basis, distinguishing the subjects, and we know that the subject case itself, the name subject case, like as you see, the name subject case, we have it here, chera, which means the subject case. Che means subject. So the subject case, the first usage case here, which is directly stated, we see that the most important term here is subject. So therefore, classification of such statement, the variation or classification of such statement will be on the basis of subject. So therefore, since we have two types of subject, the variation is of two. It's of three. One in which an action is done, shown to be done by the primary subject. Second one, where the action is shown to be done by the secondary subject, and finally, a statement in which an action is being is shown being done by both the primary and the secondary subject. Though the precedence or the priority is the secondary subject in that case when it comes to the action, because we will later on, what will happen is that we will learn in the gender science, we'll learn something about action of the subject. So also the transitive and intransitive verb. So we talk about the action of the subject. And in that case, when we talk about the action of the subject, we will see that in this particular statement, we have to emphasize that the action of the statement belongs to the secondary subject. Though it belongs to both, but the one that takes precedence, or the one that takes priority, or the one that has a greater authority over the action is the secondary subject. So we have three of these types. So first, the statement depicting action by primary subject. Second, the statement depicting action by both primary and secondary subject. And then finally, third, the statement depicting the action by secondary subject. So three variations for the first usage case. So the first one, cheba bo zowe chawa cheba dunbe, cheba la nyebar to changbebe, chashi sumyebar, cheba bo zowe chazi namir sumbe tikte. So the statement of the usage case, the subject usage case, in which the action is shown to be done by the primary subject. So the statement depicting action by the primary subject, in that particular statement, there are three compulsory components. We already went through the understanding of the word compulsory. So when we talk about compulsory, we're not referring to compulsory as in meaning or as in understanding, but compulsory as in writing. So we already discussed that a statement could be something that is very long, in which you can explain a lot of things and you can add many different type of words to make it sound much more better, much like decorations. So, but at the core, there should be some components which actually represents the very nature of the statement. That is, without these statements written in this statement, the statement will be invalid to be recognized as such type of statement. That is, in this case, it is the statement of third grammatical case, statement of the usage of third grammatical case, and to be more specific, it is the usage of the third grammatical case in a way that the particle of the third grammatical case shows that an action is done by primary subject. So any statement that requires to fulfill all of these must consist of these three compulsory components. It can be as grand as it is. It could be as grand as possible. The usage of word could be as elegant as it can be. But if it doesn't consist of these three compulsory components, it will not be considered, it will not be identified as the statement of third grammatical case in which the action is being shown to be done by the primary subject. So therefore, these three compulsory components are: first, the primary subject; second, the action word; and finally, the particle of third grammatical case. So if a statement consists of these three in writing, and upon that, if many other words are added to make it a more elegant statement, to make it a more beautiful statement, to make it a more elaborate statement, that is allowed. And the statement to be identified as the statement of third grammatical case, where the action is action is depicted to be done by the primary subject, it doesn't require all the rest of these. Those are addition, those are good, but still it does not require. The core characteristic or the very definition of such statement requires the statement to have the primary subject, the action word, and the particle of third grammatical case. Okay, so let us see. So here I have a table in which you see that in this statement we have all the three compulsory components. First, the first statement consists of the primary subject as tashi, a person, and it consists of the particle of third grammatical case, and I have used this particular particle here. And all of you who have joined me for the last grammar class know why, because we already discussed the association based on the suffix letter. Since the suffix letter is sa, we are using ki. And then the action is higiti, to write something, to write a letter or to write a word, so depending on the context. So tashi ki higiti, tashi wrote a letter, or tashi wrote a word, or tashi wrote a letter as sending letter to someone. So we see that in this statement, where it says that tashi wrote a letter, we see that we have all these three compulsory components. First, tashi, which is the primary subject, then ki, which is the particle of third grammatical case, and then finally the giti, which is the action. And so since it has all of these three, we consider this to be a statement of third grammatical case in which the particle depicts an action was done by the primary subject. Okay, now the second. The primary subject is nga, I. The particle is he, because nga doesn't have any suffix letter, and so it can be used by both he. It can be associated with both he and ye. So here I have decided to use he, and the action is kecha she. So kecha means kecha she means to converse. So the statement is nye kecha shekin yue. I am talking. So you see that this particular particle that I've used here, kin, it's a particle that is used after every present verb, every present tense verb. In order to show that this particular present tense is a present tense that is continuous. So it's a continuous present tense. It's a present tense that's still going. So continuous present. So ngai kecha she, nye kecha shekin yue. So we see that in this particular statement, we have all the three compulsory components. First, we have the primary subject, which is nga or I. Then we have the particle of third grammatical case, because nga doesn't have any suffix letter, so it will be followed by either he or ye. So here we chose he, and kecha she, which is to talk. So these three compulsory components are present in the statement. Therefore, this statement is identified as a statement of the third grammatical case in which the particle depicts that an action was done by the primary subject. Now, third is kong. The primary action is kong, which means him or her. It's a more polite way to say him or her. The more casual way is to say ko, mo. So the more casual way to say him or her, for him it is ko, for her it is mo. Or sometimes himself and herself could be korang and morang. So this is more casual way to say this, whereas kong is a more respectful way to say him, himself, her, herself. So referring to someone to which you desire to show respect, a certain degree of respect. Kongrang, kong, which means himself, herself, him, her, but in a more polite and more respectful manner. So if you want to say he has done this, but here the he refers to, for example, like His Holiness, you will say kong. So, and then to anyone that you want to use with respect, you want to address with respect, you say kong. Okay, so kong is the primary subject. Ki is the particle of third grammatical case, and ki because we have the suffix letter nga. And kalop nang means to give teaching. Hongi kalop nang song. He gave teaching. And so we have all the compulsory component, which is kong, that is the primary subject, ki, which is the particle of third grammatical case, and finally, kalop nang, which is the action. Since this statement consists all of these three compulsory components, this becomes the statement of third grammatical case, in which the particle depicts an action done by the primary subject. Now the second, cheba bozo dan pelbe chawa cheba dunbe jubala, nyabar to tsangwebe chashi shi yobar. So, cheba bozo, cheba bo pelba, chazi, namir sumbe sikche. So, there are four compulsory components of the statement depicting action by the primary subject and secondary subject. So, I've missed this. Let me add this. So, primary subject and secondary subject. So even though we say that it is an action by primary and secondary subject, understand that the more priority, the more focus, the more precedence, the more authority lies with the secondary subject here. That is, the action which has been completed is due to the direct involvement of the secondary subject. So therefore, secondary subject takes more precedence, more authority in this type of sentence, meaning that the verb or the action belongs to the secondary subject. So in such statement, that is the statement of the third grammatical case, that in which the particle of third grammatical case depicts an action done by both primary and secondary subject, there are four components, four compulsory components. First, primary subject, second, secondary subject, third, action verb, and finally, particles of third grammatical case. So this is the factors which defines this particular type of statement. And this is a statement that is the second variation of the subject case, usage case, in which the statement shows not only the action is done by the primary subject, but this action is done by both primary and secondary subject, where secondary subject takes greater precedence or greater priority because of its necessity in fulfilling, because of its requirement in the action to fulfill this particular action. So here in this table, we have first, chebabozo, the primary subject, chebabo pelba, secondary subject, namya sumbetikte, the particles of third grammatical case, chawa, action. Okay, so juba is the statement, example statement. So here in the first statement, we have the primary subject as shinke, carpenter. We have the secondary subject, chebabo pelba, as study, x. We have two particles of the third grammatical case because of the difference in the suffix. Here we have the suffix na, therefore kaya the kekyu kisaki. Here we have no suffix at all, so hakyu isai. Please understand that we can also use yakyu. So for this type of case, like for example, in this case, it was 30. So let me take. So 30. In this type of case, you can use both yakyu isai, or you can use yakyu isai, or you can use hakyu isai. This depends entirely on you. If you're using hakyu isai, the more aspirated one, if you're using that one, know that you have to erase this punctuation, this particular punctuation you see here. You have to erase this, and then you don't add this, because we already discussed that if I make it something like 30, the problem is that we have two foundation of name. If it was actually during the first language translation, then definitely this is correct, because in that language translation, during that time, there were words which had more than one foundation of name. But since then we have already banned such usage, therefore this is not a valid spelling, because both Rakyuguri and Hakyugi becomes the foundation of name. And in a single name, it is so in a single syllable, for example, in this particular syllable, one syllable, it is not allowed to have two foundation of name. So what do? We just erase this. And then, so we just erase this. And then we have the. So that's the reason why we have sa. Even though I have written hakyuguyi here, the reason why I have sa is why I have just sa here is because we cannot have two foundation of name. And the action is which means to cut tree. So the statement is ki teri shingche. The carpenter cut down the tree using the axe. So here we see that even though the carpenter has the intention to cut down the tree, he cannot simply bite the tree and then cut it down. Or he cannot simply tear the tree with his bare hands. Or he cannot simply tackle the tree and then break it. Definitely, if it was a very young tree, very thin young tree, then might be possible. But for a fully grown tree, it's not possible to tackle it down. Neither it's possible to break it apart with bare hands. And then it's also not possible to bite through the tree. So therefore, in order to fulfill this action, it is required to use the axe. So therefore, we see that even though axe is a secondary subject, it takes great precedence here. It has a greater authority. So therefore, the statement is Shinkenki teri shingche. The carpenter cut down the tree using the axe. An axe or the axe. Depends on the context, depends on the particular statement in relation to previous statement. If it's something that's more definitive, then it's the tree. If it's something that's not definitive but an infinitive article, it's not definitive, then we consider it to be an axe. Okay, so the second example, nyapa. So the main or the primary subject is nyapa, which means the fisherman. The secondary subject is chawa, which is the fish net. And then we have two particles, yi and he. Yi and he, because so actually you can use both yi or both he, doesn't matter. But in this particular statement, I wanted to bring the usage of both of these particles. So we see that pa doesn't have suffix, so it can be associated with both he and yi. So I have used yi here. Tawa, wa, it doesn't have any suffix letters, so I have decided to use he. But in both of these cases, we see that we're able to use either of this. So we have done accordingly here. And the action is sung, which means to catch. So the statement is nyapai chave nyasung. So chawa is net, fish net. So the fisherman caught fishes. So fisherman caught fishes. We can use fishes as well as fish. Fish if it's a single type of fish. So it's a plural for single type of fish if it's just simply fish. But we can also say fishes because the particular pond that in which a lake or pond or ocean or sea in which the fisherman is fishing, there may be different species of fish. So therefore fishes as a double pronoun. Okay, nyapai trawe nyasung. So the fisherman caught fishes or fish using the net. So here we see that the fisherman has the intention of catching the fish, but then it cannot be fulfilled if the fisherman didn't have the net. Definitely he could use the fishing rod, but then that becomes more of like a hobby rather than an occupation, because the fisherman needs to sustain by selling fish. So therefore, the usage should be, so the usage of the net is eminent here. It's compulsory. We cannot do without the net. So therefore, we see that in fulfillment of this particular action of catching the fish, net, the fish net, is important. So therefore, the action of catching the fish by the fisherman is done by the usage of the net. So net is the secondary subject here, and fisherman is the primary. So we see that in this statement, we have both of them. And both of them has done the action because the fisherman has caught the fish, but it was caught by the usage of the net, fish net. Now, sitting, which is the primary subject, lakpa, which is the secondary subject, because even though this may not be a tool, but please understand that this is a component of sitting, which is an individual, a person. So that is why we are using lakpa as a secondary subject. So here we understand that the secondary subject has no suffix letter, so therefore it could be associated with he or ye, both of these. Here I have decided to use the he, which is more aspirated sound, and then sitting is the individual. Therefore, since it has the suffix na, we're using he. So these are the two particles that we're using, and the action that is done is remoti, which is to draw something. So sitting ki lagpe remoti. Sitting drew a painting, or Sitting drew a drawing with his hand. So hand meaning that he has used his hand to draw it. So therefore, it is important to have, in this case, it's important to understand that the action of drawing is done by the hand, without which the drawing would not be finished, if we are referring that a drawing was done by the hand. In other case, definitely could be done in any other way also, because the computer is also capable of providing such drawing. But sitting has done it with his hand, so therefore the hand becomes the secondary subject and sitting becomes the primary subject, in which the secondary subject is not a tool, but a component, a part of the primary subject. And since this statement consists all of these four components, compulsory components, the primary subject, sitting, secondary subject, lakpa, particle of third grammatical case, ki and he, and then action, remoti. Therefore, this statement is considered to be a statement of third grammatical case, the usage case of the subject case, in which the particle shows an action is done by the primary and secondary subject. Okay, now the third statement. So, cheba po pepe chawa chepar pepe joba lang yapar to sangwe pe chashe sum yapar. So the statement which shows that an action is done by, which depicts an action by the secondary subject, requires three compulsory components. Cheba po pelpa, chati, namye sumbe tikte. Secondary subject, action word, and particle of third grammatical case. So any statement which is to be identified as a statement of third grammatical case and usage case of subject case and subject usage case of subject case of the variation in which the particle shows an action done by the only by the secondary subject, requires these three compulsory components: secondary subject, action word, and particle of third grammatical case. And like I said before, compulsory component not in the meaning, but in writing. So all of these should be present in writing in that particular statement. So, shaba po pelpa, secondary. So it must consist the secondary subject, Namie sumbetsite, particle of third grammatical case, chawa, action, and juba. Then these three components, and juba is the statement, the example statement. So here we see the first example in which the secondary subject is ka, which means mouth. Since mouth is a component of any living being, if it's part of a living being, so it's a component or part of a living being. E is the particle of third grammatical case because ka doesn't have any suffix letter. It is without the suffix letter, so it can be followed by e or he, the more aspirated one. But here I've decided to use the particle e. And then the action is she, to speak. Kai she, speak with mouth. So kai she. Here we see that this particular statement consists of all the three compulsory components. First, ka, which is the secondary subject. Second, yi, which is the particle of the third grammatical case. And finally, the verb, action word, which is she. So therefore, this statement can be identified as a statement of third grammatical case in which the particle shows usage. The particle shows that an action is done by the secondary subject. Then mik, which is eyes, ki, which is the particle of third grammatical case, te, which means to see, the verb or action. So the statement is miki te, see through eyes. So here we see that in this particular statement, we have all the three compulsory components which characterize a statement as the statement of the third grammatical case in which the particle depicts an action done by the secondary subject, mik, which is the eye and a component of an individual, be it person, be it animal. So mikite. And ki is the particle. Ki is used here because the suffix letter is ka. So, if you do the revision of the previous class, in which we talked about the association based on suffix letter, you will understand this because it's written. The rules are written in the text. And te is to look or to see. It's the action. So therefore, we see that all the three compulsory components are present here. Finally, the third example, sim, ki, some. Here the secondary subject is sim, which is the mind. Ki is the particle of the third grammatical case, and some is to think, the object, the action. So therefore, we see that in this statement, sim ki some, think by the mind, thought by the mind, or think by the mind. We see that the action of thinking is done by the mind. So therefore, in this statement, we see that all the three compulsory components, which characterizes this statement as a statement of third grammatical case, not only third grammatical case, it also characterizes this as one of the variation of the usage case of the third grammatical case, which is the subject case. Not only the usage case, it shows the variation of that subject case, which is the third one, which is the statement in which the action is depicted. This action is depicted to be done by the secondary subject. Okay, so these are the three variation of the usage case of the particle of third grammatical case, which is directly stated in the text. So it is stated here, this particular word, cheda. This two word, che and da, tells us that this type of statement is the usage case of the subject case. Che, which refers to chebapo or chepo, primary and secondary subject. Da means a statement or a particular structure of sound or statement. So statement of the subject, primary or secondary subject. And what is done here? The action is done here. Okay, so this is the usage case, which is directly shown in the text. So during the next class, we're going to discuss the second type of usage case, the usage case that is not directly stated in the text of 30, but are inferential. And we take these usage cases, we understand the usage because these usage cases through the text of Smriti Gyana of the Armor of Speech. So, therefore, we will discuss these. Understand that, please understand that there are more usage cases of the inferential usage case than of the directly stated usage case. And all of these are understood by the by observing the spoken language, by observing the writing, by observing the grammatical structure of Tibetan language, and then made apparent by the text of speech of armor of speech. So armor of speech. So these three are the variation of the usage case of the direct, the direct use, the one that is directly stated in the text, that is the subject case. There are three variations. The first variation is, there are three types of classification of variation. The first one is the statement of the subject case in which the action is shown, the action is depicted to be done by the primary subject. The second variation is of the statement of the subject case in which the particle shows the action is done by both primary and secondary subject, in which the precedence is taken by the precedence, or the main authority is given to the secondary subject, not to the primary. Because even though the intention is with the primary, the action cannot be fulfilled without the secondary subject. Or in this particular statement, it is shown that the action is directly, the action is fulfilled by the usage of the secondary subject. Because there could be an argument saying that if it's a very general statement, then we could have many different methods to fulfill this particular action. So let me repeat this. I'll try to be slower. It can be argued that if this is a very general statement, then definitely cutting down a tree could be achieved by many different methods. It does not have to be just cutting by an axe. But then here we are giving precedence to the secondary subject, because in this very statement, we see that the action is fulfilled only by the usage of this particular secondary subject. So in this case, we say that the tree was cut down by the woodcutter. It could be carpenter. So here we understand it as a woodcutter. But cutting of tree is only possible because the woodcutter used the axe to cut down the tree. So therefore, the precedence given to the secondary subject, axe, rather than the primary subject, the woodcutter. So therefore, for those type of argument, one may answer it in this manner. So three variation, we have three variation. So first one, we have the usage case in which a particle shows action done by the primary subject. Second, the particle shows that the subject action is done by the primary and secondary subject. And finally, the usage case in which the particle of third grammatical case shows that the action is done by the secondary subject. And both in written. So in written, it shows that action is done by the secondary subject. But one must understand that when we are talking about the third variation, of having just the secondary subject, it's because in writing, we only write the secondary subject. It has to be understood that without the person, the hand itself cannot do an action. The mouth cannot do its action. The eyes cannot do the action. So therefore, the primary subject is inferentially always there, but directly not stated in the statement, and is not the focus of the statement at all. Okay, so this is the usage case of the subject case with 3 variation, which is directly stated in the text. So this is what we're going to discuss for today's class. And before I read the dedication, line of dedication, if we have any questions, so today I will be able to take 3 questions. So if anyone has questions, please ask away. Unnecessary. So when we say speak with mouth, so we can say speak, right? But the thing is that in this particular statement, we are particularly showing that the action of speaking is done by the mouth. Definitely, we cannot speak without the mouth. So therefore, we won't say that there is any other part that speaks. So therefore, it becomes more inferential, or it becomes more logical to think that it's not necessary for us to state the mouth. But this is a specific statement in which we are depicting that. So therefore, it's about the statement, not about how we should use it, because definitely more logically, it is very illogical to show it in this way. But yes, this is an example. And so we see that it's a statement in which the secondary subject is depicted. So many of the secondary subjects, when we already consider that, but then see, the other thing is that if we are going to say speak, but in Tibetan, the thing is that the very action of speaking is classified in 2. First, the action of speaking that belongs to the subject. Second, the action of speaking that belongs to the object. So if it was a statement in which the action belonged to the subject, right? For example, if we say kecha she, which means to talk. Here we see that if we don't have to say, like, if we don't say tashi keja, we just say generally we say that diru keja mangbo shes, diru keja mangbo shes, which means many people talked here, or tarin keja mangbo shes. Today many people talk, so today becomes the object here, the time and the object here. So in this case, we see that the subject, the action belongs to the object. So therefore, definitely we don't have to emphasize much on the subject, be it the secondary or the primary subject. But in the statement kai she, we see that we're not at all giving we're not at all highlighting or giving importance to the subject. Sorry, not subject, object. Sorry, object. Object is there in inferentially, but we are not making it clear, or we are not emphasizing on the object. So therefore, the highlight becomes the subject, and since therefore the action of speaking belongs to the subject, and therefore in that case we just show the mouth or the cup in that statement. So now the second one, are there particles that have authority over the statement? This is not possible, but definitely there are teaching, like there are classes in which people will teach Tibetan grammatical system, and it's even more common where you'll see that they place more precedence towards the authority of the particle. But this is not something we're doing here. So in our class, no, it doesn't exist. But definitely there are cases where people will teach in that manner. in that manner. But then if it is done in that manner, the problem becomes that if the statement has the authority, then the problem becomes that we need to something if that is this important that it carries the influence over the entire statement, it should have a particular meaning by itself. Otherwise, it becomes very dilute. If it's something that depends on the context to give the meaning of itself, yet it has the entire influence or authority over a statement, then it becomes a very strange type of word, because for its own meaning, it has to depend on the context. Let me see. So please let me see. It is the line 12. Is there a typo on slide 11? Slide 11, line 2. Let me see. Let me see. Yes, this is typography. Thank you very much for showing this. So this is secondary subject. So, okay, so where was I? Yes, so therefore, if it was, thank you. So that was a typography. It was secondary subject. So yes, so if it has the authority over the statement, one. But still, if it had to depend on the context to give its own meaning, that becomes a very strange statement. It becomes a very strange case where it has the authority over the statement, yet its meaning cannot come from itself. So therefore, even if it has an authority, it has an authority on the basis that one states that it has an authority, but not because it has a meaning. And the meaning is dominant over the authority over the statement. So therefore, we don't consider any particle having authority over statement. Yes, they are factors to determine a particular statement as such and such type of statement, but it doesn't have any authority over the context of the statement. The authority is backwards, where the statement and the context defines the context defines the usage of that particular particle. Therefore, we have different usage cases. So if it was not in that case, then the particle, if the particle would have the authority, then all of the particles have the same spelling, and so it should have a meaning by itself. If it has a meaning by itself, it should have only one usage case, which is based on the particle. But that's not the case. So therefore, we see the authority lies with the context of the statement, not with the particle. The first grammatical case, yes. First grammatical case is, but then the first grammatical case is grammatical case, and the particle is the particle of third grammatical case is the recompound particle. But yes, recompound particle, very wonderful, has a certain type of influence over the statement. But then that also depends on the context, because in some contexts, this recompound particle just acts as a conclusive statement. It acts as a conclusive punctuation, which says, from this point, the narration doesn't continue. It's a single narration. So in that case, we see that it also depends on the context. But yes, as we understand the recompound particle, it is influential towards the entire statement. In that context, it might seem that way, but no. So no particle, as far as this class is concerned, and as far as interpretation of the grammatical text of Tumi Sambuddha in this class, no particle has authority over statement. That's so. Okay, so I can take one more question. Does anyone have one more question? I can take one more question. If anyone has any question. Yes. So this answer it will be more apparent when we go through with each of the particles. So with each particle, we'll understand the structure of each of the statement. That is the usage case of each particle. But yes, in 4 is actually the maximum when it comes to compulsory component. 4 becomes the maximum. According to this text, when I say this text, please understand that we're talking only lesser. We only understand this as a context of the 30 and not of the gender sign. In gender sign, we will discuss on during the gender sign. So no need to state it here. But as far as the 30 is concerned, 4 is the maximum. So I think this is it for today. And yes, please ask the question. Thank you very much in the chat. And those who have questions, if you want to ask, you can ask in the chat, the group we have of the Heruka Institute grammar class, or you can directly send it to me and I will get back to you when I can. Some of you have sent me the assignment for previous class. Thank you very much. I am going to check it this evening and then send the feedback by tomorrow. Very sorry for the delay. And then the homework for this one will be also sent to tomorrow morning, where you can check it in the group. So those who are able to finish the assignments, please send it to me and I will check them. So very sorry for the delay for the first one. It should have been done in the first day that you have sent me, but because of certain circumstances, it was delayed till now. But I will make sure that I send the answer by tomorrow. And if you have any questions regarding the assignment, so please ask me. And next class, grammar class, we will also discuss the answers for the assignments. And yes, so please also memorize. I've sent the memorization. Memorize them. I have sent a little bit, a small trick that I use. Memorize the new portion in the morning. If you're capable of memorizing 4 lines, make it to 3. Because what happens is that in the evening, you have to recite the entire portion that you have memorized. For example, if it's the first day, it doesn't matter. But if it's, for example, if it was the 30th day, you have to memorize everything from the first day to the 30th day during the evening. So if you do it to your maximum capacity, what happens is that you cannot follow up during the evening. And then sometimes when you cannot do it, sometimes it becomes demoralizing and then you feel, oh, it's not happening. So therefore, if you reduce 1 line to your from your maximum capacity, it becomes more practical. If you want to reduce 2, you can reduce 2. So you can use that technique to memorize it, and eventually you will memorize everything. Definitely. It's just a matter of time, and you'll memorize everything. Yes, so please memorize. If you want me to listen and send your feedback, so some of the video voice recording that you have sent, those who are joining me from the Dharma vocabulary class, thank you very much for that recording. Very wonderful. I listened to some of them and I will learn from them and try to recite them most probably in few weeks or months. If not by heart, I'll definitely try to recite it by looking at the text. So thank you very much for sending them. These were very wonderful, and thank you for everyone's commitment in studying this language. And I know that some of these lessons sometimes I tend to include so much information in so little time. For that, very sorry. And if you feel that too much information was taught in a very short time, please tell me and I will change it accordingly. Or if you want me to clarify it, make sure you send me the questions directly and I will answer to them to the best of my ability. Okay, so let me just read the final verse of dedication. So, okay, so this dedication I've written both in Tibetan and English. So Tagi Chini Sabikawati Namya Samdun Tropar Hokune Terab Dine Chumchu Tokipar Namya Trundun Namyan Kewasho Lamakena. So what does this text? So what I have done is that I tried to write everything by myself to make it an original verse so that it could be closer to every one of you. Definitely, we can also include the verse of the great masters who have written it infinitely better than what I am capable of. But I have written it in my imperfect speech so that you might feel familiar because all of you are already studying Tibetan from me. So that's the reason why I'm including all the texts which are written originally by me. So that is the reason why. So if there's imperfection in the words, imperfection in the meaning, I ask every one of you to be patient with me. So the line translates, this merit that I have accumulated how much soever, I dedicate this for the actualization of my guru's aspiration. So for me, my own guru, for you, every one of you, your own guru. By doing this from this life till I attain the complete enlightenment, may I always be born where my guru resides. And then the guru knows all. So the guru is omniscient, so he knows all. So this is the verse. And then finally, before we end this, I recite this small few lines of apology. So I apologize to everyone, mother sentient beings, for not being able to attain enlightenment and delay in attaining enlightenment to this point. And I also apologize for my imperfect speech by which I'm giving the teaching to the most wonderful teachings, which belongs to the basket of wisdom. May the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and Arhats of 3 times have patience with me. And most importantly, all of you students, may you have patience with my most imperfect speech, and may I be able to take this as a inspiration to improve myself, so that I could provide even better teaching and better classes for every one of you in the coming time. So by this, I take motivation, and I dedicate all the merits that is accumulated from this class to my and all the sentient beings' attainment of complete enlightenment. And so I finished this course with most of auspiciousness. Thank you very much for joining in. And please send the questions in the group. I appreciate these questions so much, so I'll try to answer them to the best of my ability. And I will see every one of you if you're joining me for the Dharma class, I'll see you on Sunday. If you're joining me for Dharma vocabulary class, sorry, I have to clarify this Dharma vocabulary class, I'll see you on Sunday. If for the grammar class, I'll see you on Monday. If for both, I'll see you on Sunday and Monday. So thank you very, very much for joining in, and Klashitele to everyone.